What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Jobbers and Goons, and today we are doing a sponsored video by my guy Kano. It originally started out Thor vs. Warworld, but that was kind of a weird scenario because you don't really take Thor prisoner. You either fucking kill him or you don't. So it's kind of tricky. And I was like, let's change it to a battle I kind of talked about years ago, but didn't get too crazy with it. And it was the Thors versus the Lanterns. And specifically, we will be doing today Modern Thor, Jane Foster Thor, and Beta Ray Bill versus the Green Lanterns, the big trio of Godstorm, John Stewart, which is current Stewart, Hal Jordan, and Kyle Rayner. And with me today to tackle this conversation and to have a pretty fun back and forth about how we think this scenario plays out, I have my boy Lumos, if you want to say what up.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's me, Lumos Max, Lantern Fanatic, and I'm glad to be here hanging out with your homie Jobbers and Goons to talk about some pretty sick matchups today.
Yeah, and before we get started, I'm going to tag him in the video, so you can literally just click on the hyperlink to his channel. He's about to hit 7K. He's had a ton of content out recently. Go check out his Cosmic Armor stuff. It's really interesting. And yeah, so definitely show him some love as well. Let him know Goon Nation's tuned in. But we're going to get into this. We're going to do brief breakdowns on the trio. I will handle the Thor side. He'll give a brief breakdown on the Lantern side. And then we'll get to the fun part, which is us discussing how we think it plays out. So lock in and let's begin. So first up on the Thor side, we have Jane Foster Thor. This is Jane Foster, the love interest of Thor that picked up the hammer in his absence. She was battling a losing fight against cancer, and wielding Mjolnir not only made her a Thor, but saved away the cancer. That would have prevented the Cosmic Armor storyline. Oh, I'm sorry. But she picked up the hammer. A lot of people had mixed feelings on it, but regardless, we're here to talk about her power. She does have the basic abilities that come along with Thor on top of this. She doesn't really adhere to the old rules of Asgard. She's literally a human, so she'll kind of just swing and bang as she pleases. She was able to take on Mangog, was smart enough to concoct a way to momentarily take him down, which for some reason was a fucking sun, but it is what it is. Shout out to Marvel. She was able to battle a gladiator who could blitz across the multiverse or creation or Yggdrasil, whatever you want to call it, in the blink of an eye, blitzed the vision of Heimdall, took on the execution armor, and could take on the Shi'ar gods pretty comfortably, and she does scale to that and above. Obviously, we will be giving her a copy of Mjolnir. We know Thor in modern times can make copies of Mjolnir anyway, so that doesn't matter. And he has his own weapons as well. So she will be able to wield that, no problem, for those wondering. And yeah, she's like a less nuanced Thor who wasn't too crazy with the nuance to begin with. She can hit just as hard, and even Odin admitted in the others that she is a worthy Thor. Like, she's a scrappy bitch, so shout out to Jane Foster, definitely better than the movie version. On to Beta Ray Bill. Beta Ray Bill is one of my favorite Marvel characters, the Horseman, former protector of his people who got into a squabble with Thor because he thought he was an op, and then Odin was like, oh shit, you're kind of raw. You might be worthy of a hammer. Gave him Stormbreaker, a brother weapon to Mjolnir, also made in the Godforge. This is a weapon capable of massive storm summonings, manipulation, and all that. His natural characteristics of his species allows him to already keep up with Asgardians. He is a beast in nature, and he has a more nuanced take with his weaponry and abilities, in my opinion, than even Jane Foster had. He's been wielding it for years in the comics, and is one of the most reliable allies to Thor. Not to mention, he could briefly stand up to Cosmic King Thor, who was no joke. Did he get ragdolled? Yes, but that's kind of the point of Beta Ray's character, not to get ragdolled, but to keep fighting no matter what. He doesn't give up in that toughness. I mean, he's cracked Galactus' shields and armor before. He's taken on Celestial type weapons. He is no joke, and he will be a valuable asset here in this battle. And finally, for this trio, is Thor, Odin's son. Now, currently, Thor is on some wild shit if you want to catch up on what he's doing. I have videos covering his recent appearances and his current Immortal Thor storyline. This is a Thor with the all power, which is confirmed above even peak Odin and peak Odin Force and what that is capable of. Thanks to the trials of God of Stories Loki, he is currently able to produce rune magic and weaponize rune magic, which of course goes beyond narratives and allows him to create runes that are called living crisis stories or living narratives. Essentially, in the moment, he can shape his own narrative compared to all the other narratives and make what he wants. He showed this with a moment with Storm in which she made him bleed, and he said, I can be stronger than you, I can be weaker than you, I can stand up on Jupiter, I can take all things thrown at me. It depends on what the story requires. Kind of proving that in the narrative, he can make basically anything happen, including instantly making Storm weaponize her old magic in her blood and wield Mjolnir again to join the Thor Corps. With his narrative hacks, his all power, and his kingly status of being able to take on beings like the Utgard, who literally can visit the editorial offices of Marvel and crumple past iterations of Marvel comics like the Journey into Mystery, these beings are no joke. Yet Thor can stand up to them like when he took on Tornos before even getting the rune magic amp. So he actually is wildly capable, the clear powerhouse leader on this team, and will be leading the Thor Corps into battle today against the Lanterns. With that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Lumos, and I'm going to let him explain the Lantern Trio.
What's up, guys? I'm here to explain the Lanterns, and I'm going to start off with the OG Lantern himself, Hal Jordan. Hal Jordan was the first Earth Lantern to essentially acquire a green ring, and a green ring is essentially powered by willpower, and it allows you to do a variety of things, granting you the powers of flight, energy blast, shielding, yada yada yada. The really big important thing whenever it comes to Hal Jordan is the diversity that the Lantern Rings really have. Hal Jordan is the first who essentially came to be and is arguably the most dangerous consistently when only utilizing a Green Lantern Ring. This guy's thrown hands with a double-powered Zod and put him down. He's fought arguably the strongest Guardian that has existed, that being Krona, and managed to put him down while he was amped by all of the emotional entities. And he's one of the founding Justice League members and has fought pretty much every threat you could imagine that's been thrown at the Justice League throughout time. One of my notable favorites, which includes a feat where Amazo, actually with the entire powers of the Justice League, gets damaged so heavily against Hal Jordan he has to retreat from the battle. But unfortunately, at one point in time, Hal Jordan kind of lost himself to this concept of fear called parallax, went mad and blew up the entire Green Lantern Corps. And from its ashes, one Guardian remained to hand a new ring off to another member. And this brings us to our second member joining the battle today, that being Kyle Rayner. Kyle Rayner was the Torchbearer. And he's called the Torchbearer because there were no other Green Lanterns when he took over. He received no formal training. But despite all of this, he teamed up with the Justice League to replace Hal Jordan in his time there, and wound up becoming quite a powerful member during the 90s time frame of Green Lantern. Eventually coming in contact with the now maddened Parallax Hal Jordan, Kyle Rayner has a variety of feats in this era that I would consider rather impressive. The first of which is fighting Parallax Hal Jordan during Zero Hour, and then also the follow-up to that event where they fight throughout all of space and time, all the way to the modern day after the Big Bang was recreated. Following this, Kyle Rayner then proves to be arguably just as powerful, if not superior, than Hal Jordan, because he masters the powers of Ion, ascending himself into becoming something more than just a Green Lantern, no longer even needing a ring. Now, down the way, Kyle Rayner does manage to give up this power to rebirth the Corps and bring pretty much the entire Green Lantern Corps back. But consistently, he's been seen as a powerhouse and is always enjoyed being on the League, and the League enjoys having him around simply because of the utility that he offers. Kyle Rayner fights with a massive expansion of constructs. That's where he is very unique. Whereas Hal is very simple with boxing gloves and missiles, Kyle creates very abstract things. One of my favorite moments is where he's fighting Simon Baz, and he creates a giant pinball machine and plays pinball with Simon Baz during the battle. This should give you an idea of the scope, size, and scale of a lot of what he really has whenever it comes to what he brings to the table. Now, we're not including any of the White Lantern stuff today. We're just going with his classic Green Lantern stuff. So, peak, this guy is a beyond Ion level character for those who are aware of like emotional entities and things along those lines, and has plenty of statements of being rival to like Hal Jordan in terms of just his use of like the Green Lantern power up to like 2010 or so. But there's one Lantern we haven't mentioned outside of Guy, because nobody likes Guy, and that's actually John Stewart. John Stewart was a fellow Lantern who actually used to hang out with Hal Jordan back in the day, and John's had a rather interesting history whenever it comes to the totality of his time with the Lanterns in general. John's actually become a Guardian before, and tying into that, he's actually what we call an ascended being. He's not just a Green Lantern, he's something far more than an average Green Lantern, or even the best of the Green Lanterns. You see, it turns out there are 5 Crux worlds that exist within the DC cosmology, and those worlds are intended to breathe life on the highest level imaginable, as dictated by the source itself. John Stewart just so happens to be one of those people. And in the 2021 Green Lantern run, we get the experience of digging exactly what that means up, and it's very interesting. So John Stewart at this point in time is seen as a being beyond any of the gods in the God sphere, and as a being who can directly reach and touch the source itself, and is so wildly powerful that he even managed to force the source itself to send an avatar to him to tell him to chill the fuck out, because he's like wiling on a scale that no other John in the greater Omniverse has ever accomplished. This is wildly impressive, as the source itself does not appear to just anybody to tell them to chill out. This is a very rare event nonetheless. But down the way, John Stewart manages to fight a wildly powerful Guardian who absorbs the powers of every single member of the original race of the Malthusians, where the Guardians of the Universe came from, like the Zamorans, the Controllers, etc., all their power into one, and get a massive magic amp. And John Stewart was not only capable of defeating them, containing an explosion, but then also recreating a central power battery out of his power, which contains magic as well as the emotional spectrum. All of these things are seen as wildly impressive. He's also destroyed new gods in general, like the Nostalgia new god that existed down the way, and the new Neo gods that he was creating as well. And John Stewart tanked this concept called the God Storm, which was considered by even new gods to be the end of absolutely everything. And for context, that would at least be creation within what we know as DC. John is by far the biggest heavy hitter, because he doesn't just attack you through physical means anymore. He also begins to utilize concepts like hypertime and hypertime shadow clones and things along those lines to attack you in a multifaceted variety of ways. But John ate the God Wave, ascertained its power entirely, and can weaponize it against his opponents, making him incredibly difficult. And as the icing on the cake, it was Pariah who controlled the Spectre himself with no host, with Great Darkness amps, and John Stewart was capable of tanking that attack as well. So clearly we're talking some very dangerous durability whenever it comes to John Stewart, as well as his AP. And these three are very unique characters and have worked with each other for ages. The number one thing I would not underestimate whenever it comes to them is the unbelievable amount of teamwork that they can orchestrate without having saying a word at all.
All right, so we got the Lanterns out the way. Shout out to Lumos for that incredible breakdown. We got the Thors out the way, so we're going to start talking about how we see this playing out. Obviously, we're going to be putting current Thor versus Stewart. Those are the two big dogs on their teams. Who do you think Hal should go against, Beta or Jane?
I'm going to have to say Beta, because like that's the guy he's going to want to go smack. And plus Kyle, it never fails. Kyle's always trying to pick up chicks, so you already know he's going to fly over to her. You know he's going to fly over to Jane and hit on her, bro. That's just how it goes.
And Kyle's history with women is dark and sinister, but we're not here to degrade his
Yo,
abilities with the women.
can he fridge Jane Foster? That's the question.
Yeah, I see. It's kind of funny. Like when me and Loomis talked about this before, and we don't want. And first of all, I want to address. I am one of the 12 Guy Gardner fans out there, so I took offense to what he said. I like Guy because he's tough as hell and he'll swing on anyone. He doesn't win, but he
Facts.
swings, and so I rock
Facts.
with it. And it was really like this trio is just more well known. And it was kind of hard to bring a fourth in on the Thor side. Could have maybe used Volstagg or like Storm, but I just didn't want to because they'd fucking murder Guy. But
Yeah, and it's like there's like a clear differentiation in the barrier between Guy and like Kyle. Like Guy, though, is very badass. Don't get me wrong in terms of his scaling. He just never has had like I'm ascending past Ion level stuff like the other characters on this list or
he's
anything
like the
along those lines.
Renji from Bleach. That's the best way to describe Guy. You respect his toughness, but if we're trying to win the battle, we're probably not bringing him. Now, Hal versus Beta, I got Hal in that one. I do think Beta's tough as shit, and a problem for Hal, and this will probably be a problem for the entire Green Lantern team that we'll be touching on, is Beta's tough as fuck. Like, Beta can take a hit. Beta can take a battle. Like, even with the power levels Hal's at, which me and Loomis, I think, agree, in terms of the Green Lantern side, he's stronger than Kyle. He's gonna be hitting hard as shit. And Beta can take that at least long enough for Thor to aid him. And the reason I say that is Thor is quite clearly showing now he can amp his allies and give them basically whatever story he wants. He just gave Storm the story of becoming another Thor and joining the Thor Corps. He brought back the concept of the Thor Corps itself. His rune magic is a living story. He can essentially change the narrative of the battle. And I think that's problematic for Hal for if like Beta sends out the bat signal, for Thor, like, yo, I'm getting fucked on. Come help the boy. In terms of actually beating Hal, I don't see that. If they were like locked in one space by themselves, I'm probably going with Hal at that point. But Beta can at least hold him off for a bit. I don't know what you think about this matchup.
I'll agree. One thing that I will admit is a flaw with the lanterns is they're often afraid to harm people until they recognize what they can take. So they start the match off a little bit weaker. So like it wouldn't surprise me to see Beta like roll up like really strong out the gate. But like the lanterns as time goes on, something that's really consistent with them is the longer they stay in the fight, the more driven they get and the more dangerous they become as a result of that. So like the longer the match goes in a 1v1, I think the more dangerous off it is. But as you said, the longer that match goes, the greater chances are Beta's going to look over to like Thor and be like, yo, this is starting to get a little wild. Like, back me up, bro.
Yeah, it's like I have Hal if it's that 1v1, but in a team setting, Beta could survive long enough, I believe, to not die right away. But and another advantage with Beta is Beta's a good person, but Beta also comes from a war-torn background. He's not here to pick daisies. Like, he's swinging right away, and he's swinging hard as shit. So early on, he's going to give Hal trouble, which will at least give him time to have aid from others. Now, Jane Foster versus Kyle is a battle of mid. I am so sorry to the fans of both. This is the battle no one's checking on. This battle won't influence really who wins this all. Who do I think would win? I don't know. That's weird because like when I think of Kyle, he didn't go too crazy for me as a Green Lantern. Like, I thought he was definitely respectable, but his crazy shit more so comes from, like, the White Lantern run and getting amps. Here, against Jane, Jane is at least good at throwing weird shit. Like, she might summon the Mother Storm, like, shit like that. And try to use her arcane / weather abilities to give him problems. She will be, I think what makes Kyle dope is his art background and how he uses that to, like you mentioned, influence his constructs. That might be weird for her. But she also approaches things from like a very logical standpoint where it's like, okay, he's making this construct. It's likely energy. Let me try to like attack his ring. Let me try to attack the energy source itself. Maybe I can absorb it with Mjolnir. She might do so because like her strength actually comes from her arrogance when it comes to the mythos of Asgard and Mjolnir, in which she'll just try shit. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like, cross that bridge when you get there type deal. So I actually don't know who would win this. I'm curious to see what you would think. Like, she swung on Odin and made him bleed. And she was like, oh shit, I can do that. You know, like that. She's kind of crazy. So
I really do think it kind of depends on exactly which Kyle is rolling into this battle. Because if this is base Kyle, like, don't get me wrong, he's got some really good stuff. But I could see like base Green Lantern Kyle maybe taking an L here. That wouldn't like blow my mind or anything. But if we're talking like Ion Kyle Rayner in here, like Kyle at the pinnacle of what his solo run was, I'm not gonna lie, Kyle in his solo run was like disturbingly powerful. He existed everywhere at once, and Superman had to tell him to chill out because he put Superman out of a job. There was no more crime in the universe that Superman could solve whenever Kyle was like really going crazy. I would consider that Ion version of him terrifying in terms of how powerful he is. I would take the Ion version over Jane, but the base version, I wouldn't be upset if he had lost that battle by any means.
all right, so we're gonna go into the main event. We're gonna go into what the people got the popcorn out for. Godstorm versus the All Power. Rune Magic versus the Ascended Human. So this is spicy. This is tough as shit. I just read Emerald Knight. Jon Stewart, Ben loved him since the cartoon. That's where I became a fan of Stewart. This is tough as shit, but I lean Thor at this particular moment. This is a Thor that just took on Tornos, the All Thor or Utgard Thor. These are the beings that are beyond the narratives of Marvel and actually cast the shadows that allow for Marvel's creation to tell its story. Shit, we've seen Utgard Loki, who Thor is also preparing to fight after summoning the Thor Core. This Loki is sitting in the editorial office saying all of Marvel's creation, all of Marvel's stories are mine to play with and mine to destroy. I can do what I want. Yet Thor is still surviving and fighting these bastards. On top of this, his living crisis, his living narrative magic, he could change the narrative of the battles for his allies. That might be weird as fuck for the other two to deal with in terms of the Lanterns. Like if Hal suddenly gets hit with a narrative that Jane Foster is the greatest Green Lantern to ever live. That'd be, I don't know, something like that would be funny as shit. Oh my god, they would immediately call for like in the wokeness in comics if this was a crossover battle that happened. But I think it's actually worse if they start cooking his teammates, because then Thor's gonna be like, oh, y'all want to be big dogs. And that's where I mean, he just forged a weapon that cuts narratives. Like, he just formed a weapon that forges stories themselves. And while I think I'm not going to say a toss-up. Like, I would understand if someone thinks Godstorm wins because the lore behind it is impressive. The actual things Thor's accomplishing right now and the way his power extends is crazy. And I would probably favor him to clutch up for his team, but I'm curious to hear Lumo's side of things.
So you're not wrong in like pretty much looking at all the statements that he has. Even in just that run, you're looking at stuff that he says and it's like, yo, this guy is summoning an agent of the source to tell him to chill out. This guy is teleporting across all of creation, affecting all of creation, weaponizing powers that can destroy all of creation simultaneously. He is very scary in terms of what Godstorm Jon Stewart is bringing to the table. One thing I will admit is very frustrating is we just don't see him fighting enough of established characters that are incredibly dangerous. All the people he defeated, I think, are incredibly powerful. Don't get me wrong, but to what degree, I think is up in the air. The statements are god tier. I just wish we saw something a little bit more solid. And something you said actually was actually really curious to me. His ability for like narrative manipulations and stuff like that. Jon Stewart has something similar, but he utilizes hyper time to essentially solve that. Notice in my explanation earlier, I said that he creates shadow clone hyper time shadow clones, where he just basically creates an alternative version of himself through hyper time that can do whatever he wants. But with that narrative manipulation and stuff, he may legitimately be able to manipulate those hyper time worlds to not existing. Like he may be able to limit some of what Jon Stewart could do. And if we had more solid evidence of him fighting characters on that level, I would feel more confident with Jon Stewart. But I don't know, man. I feel like with those statements, alone, just the raw, ridiculous power of him having to do having ties directly with the source, it really does make me wonder if he could come out on top in this battle. But both of these characters are close enough, in my opinion, that it really could go either way. We just kind of got to wait for their stories to build out to see exactly what the end game goal for them is.
Yeah, and I will say, bring up something interesting, I think, for Thor's end. So when he reforms the idea of the Thor core and the story of the Thor core, it's obviously different than what it originally was in Secret Wars. But he tells Thornos, like, hey, with all your power, with your wheel of fate, which essentially decides everything, I stalemated you. But now we're about to jump the fuck out of you. And while that's a funny line, it's literally the implication that Thor can bring the other Thors to his level. If he's able to jump someone like Tornos, and he's saying it's way worse now, just having like a few Thors on his side that don't scale to him would not make sense for that statement. Do you understand what I mean? Like, he's clearly brought them to a level to take on someone like that.
What I will say is, although I can't say definitively that he's creating characters on the level of himself, Jon Stewart in the recent age has been donating. I think it's a good way to put it. Donating essentially his weaponry, his energies, to random former Green Lanterns to make them incredibly dangerous figures. Now, I can't say that they're like Thor level or anything like that. I wouldn't make that claim because we haven't seen them do anything. But clearly, he can also share his power to a certain extent with his allies as well, creating weapons and stuff.
I think that's what makes this battle so dope, which is why like Lumos was like, yeah, let's just fuck it, let's both talk about it. Because Godstorm and Thor are just on different levels. Both of them are getting insane pushes right now. Shout out my boy Philip Kennedy Johnson. He's working on the Lantern shit. We're going to try to get him in another interview soon with me and Lumos. Just waiting on him to free up time because he's got the new Lantern stuff, just concluded Action Comics, and he's got whole crazy amount of work. But if I was a betting man, I would bet if we're going off overall individual wins, technically, I'd probably go with the Lanterns. But if I were going by the overall winner, I think Thor is the baddest dude on the field right now between all six. But I'm open to Godstorm people saying they could clutch up. And I'll let Lumos give his final stance on if he was a betting man, and then we'll get into conclusions.
If I was a betting man, I feel like relying on the source itself, like the scaling and how he's affecting it, that to me is really significant. But like you're saying, I can also understand people not buying it unless they see raw feats. I'm open to Thor winning. I'm not the kind of biased DC fanboy who's just going to sit here and tell you that, you know, DC always wins over Marvel or anything along those lines.
Definitely,
but like I said, for now, I'm going to lean towards. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That much they changed.
Yeah,
but I think I'll lean towards. John. But I tell you what, something I would actually like to do. I'd actually like to return to this after their current runs finish, because Jon Stewart is currently working in this War Journal storyline where he's fighting new beings that are seen as threats to even people wielding the Godstorm. And so I'm curious to see if maybe they get more for him, something more solid, so I can more solidify him fighting characters in that pantheon of power. And we should come back and redo just that matchup whenever that run finishes. For
sure. And Thor, like he's saying, Thor's also getting constant updates. So what we'll do is when both runs conclude, we'll circle back probably on Lumos' channel. We'll do Godstorm versus All Power, and we'll decide our final stance on that when they have their material laid out. But you guys, put in the comments section, let us know who you think wins. Am I going to go to Philip and get an author statement putting Thor above Stewart? Yes, I am, because I'm a bitch. But besides that, seriously, go check out Lumos' content. He's been dropping mad videos. It's the Christmas season. This will probably be the first video to start back with my Christmas music per usual. I had a lot of fun with this, and before we head out, Lumos, plug yourself. Go ahead.
Hell yeah, dude, it's been great. I'm almost there, Max. Check out my channel. Definitely, like you said, the Cosmic Armor Superman scaling I've got, that one's been really big. People are really enjoying my unique takes on that. And I've been just cranking out the content. So definitely stop by, see if you like something on the channel. And I look forward to covering this down the way with you. And it's always good hanging out, man.
Yeah, and keep a lookout for us to collab again soon, because we have some what ifs that are pretty crazy that we'll be visiting that aren't necessarily just battles. They're literally reviewing past storylines and how things would change if certain characters weren't there, if certain characters were added. It's going to be a lot of fun. So keep on a lookout for future collabs. And yeah, it's been your boy Jobbers and Goons, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.
Later.